Today on the Women Mind the Water Art of It series on womenmindthewater.com, I am speaking with Hoku Cody, a native Hawaiian seabird biologist and lifelong ocean lover, protector, and advocate. Hoku advocates for community stewardship in actions that revitalize traditional rights within Hawaii's natural and cultural resource management industry. Hoku currently works with the National Ocean Protection Coalition. In this capacity, she creates and supports marine protected areas. Hoku also is working to have the Pacific Remote Islands designated a national marine sanctuary. The Women Mind the Water Art of It series podcast on womenmindthewater.com engages the artists in conversation about their work and explores their connection with the ocean. Through their stories, Women Mind the Water hopes to inspire and encourage action to protect the ocean and her creatures. Today, I'm speaking with Hoku Cody. Hoku is a native Hawaiian and lifelong ocean lover, protector, and advocate. She acknowledges a deep kinship with the ocean's creatures through a broad lens that marries conservation, community, protection, diversity, equity, and inclusion and culture. Hoku co-founded a program that works in partnership with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. This program employs the principles of community stewardship into management actions at Kilauea Point National Wildlife Refuge. Hoku also initiated the Kiamanu Project. It facilitates a multi-stakeholder cooperative for the procurement and repository of salvage-appropriated seabirds. The cooperative effort revitalizes the use of seabird parts and feathers in socio-religious ceremonies across Hawaii. Welcome, Hoku. I feel extremely grateful that we have the technology to connect you, it turns out not in Hawaii, but in Cozumel, with me in Maine. I am honored that you are joining me today to talk about Hawaii. I'd like to begin by briefly providing for our listeners an overview of Hawaii's history. Hawaii was an internationally recognized kingdom until 1893, when American and European interests overthrew the Hawaiian monarchy. 5 years later, Hawaii was annexed by the U.S. Nearly 60 more years passed before it became our 50th state. But it was another 30 years before the U.S. government formally apologized for its role in the overthrow of Hawaii's native government. Hoku, let's talk about Hawaii in broader terms. I imagine most listeners have a picture in their minds of Hawaii. I think we might all agree that it consists of a group of tropical islands situated in the Pacific Ocean. Some listeners probably think of Hawaii in terms of the ocean, volcanoes, and vacation. I'm not sure how many think about Hawaii as a homeland. Hoku, it might be helpful for you to provide insight into how a native Hawaiian views Hawaii.
Thank you so much, Pam, for having me, and great summary of the history of Hawaii in relationship to the United States. And for me, I am not nearly as old as Hawaii is as long as a statehood. I was born in the 80s, and as long as I've been alive, I've grew up and been fed by and held by the ocean. I think there are different experiences that people have being from Hawaii, as well as being native Hawaiian. For me, I come from a family of ocean people. So naturally for me, I grew up by the ocean. Many of my days and my off time outside of the obligations of, family and school, or even within the obligations of family, we were by the ocean. Some of my most formative, as well as my most happiest memories are near the ocean growing up. Outside of ocean, I grew up in a musical family. We played a lot of music, both at the ocean and at home. I also danced hula and played sports. And for me, there was no better place. I think as I started to get older and went to university, I originally was a graphics and new media major and got a bachelor's in that. And as I got that, I found out that it was possible to have a job at the ocean that was not a surfer or professional surfer or a lifeguard, that you could in fact have a job that spoke towards or even acted towards helping or taking care of the ocean. And so that's kind of how I landed as a marine scientist today, or my marine biologist. I identify with Hawaii as very much the ocean is as much of my quote unquote homeland as it is my home ocean.
So would you say is the most pressing issue or the most pressing issues that face the Hawaiian coast?
When we look at life in the islands, and as well as if you look to traditional knowledge, we have this creation story called the Kumulipo. And the Kumulipo is a creation story that speaks of, in Hawaii, the origins of a Hawaiian existence and some of the first things that were born out of the darkness being the most primordial start of life. Some of the first things that were born was a ukukoa and a pukoa, which is a coral polyp and a coral head. So fundamentally, we would look at coral reef ecosystems as some of the most important things to look at and to take care of in an island ecosystem. Today, there's a lot of coral reef ecosystems along our shoreline that are also, inundated by development and many people wanting to go and snorkel and be part of that. And while we are more than happy to share our aina and our place with the world in hopes that they get the same messages as we get, I would, without corals near the islands or without corals as an extension of our lands, it would be really hard to sustain an island lifestyle or ecosystem. I would say that is important.
Thank you for including the Hawaiian cultural perspective. And I'm wondering how much of that is considered in decision making. I believe that approximately 10% of the state's current population is Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islanders. So how does that affect the decision-making process, particularly when it comes to conservation and preservation issues?
I guess personally speaking, I would consider conservation to be an uphill battle in Hawaii. Politically, there's, with 10%, as you said, 10% of the population is Native Hawaiians. There's more Native Hawaiians that live outside of Hawaii than in Hawaii, and so I would say that it's a small but mighty perspective, deep sense of responsibility. Some would call it an ancient mandate to protect and love it, and make sure that it is as pristine as it was when I received it in my lifetime, and I hope to pass it on to the next generation in as good or better condition as I received it.
Well, I know in the bio that I was provided, it said that you were a seabird biologist. And so I wanted to ask you in the intro, I said salvage appropriate when it came to seabird parts and use in socio-religious actions. And I wonder, could you define for me what salvage appropriate means and how it relates to conservation?
Sure. Very complex terms I share there. To be specific, because most times when I say we're going to use seabirds to incorporate or revitalize practices within traditional ceremonies, oftentimes people tend to think that we are taking live birds and killing them. And that is, to be clear, that's not the case. They are, when we say salvage, that most definitely means that they are already dead, and we either collect them fresh dead, or we provide a system where others work. There's a collaborative effort. So maybe perhaps myself or cultural practitioners, perhaps we are not the ones collecting it, but we have to relay messages to the scientists, the biologists, or managers of what would qualify to be part of traditional ceremonies. So salvage appropriate quite simply means that, these birds are dead. and they could have died from a few number of things. In Papahanaumokuakea, we have birds that are salvaged right on the land, right on the island or atoll. Most often they die from plastic ingestion. They eat plastic and will, malnourish, and they will die. And hopefully, and it's the hope of, we hope to gather them at a point of their dying process, if you will, that's more fresh than decay. And then in the main Hawaiian Islands, they are often procured from partnerships with wildlife rehabilitation centers, national wildlife refuge places. Those are usually often when you have people cohabitating with birds, you will have issues of light pollution. Perhaps cars will drive and hit them. And so they die due to other factors, as well as also still having plastic in them. And so we work closely with managers, biologists, and folks who have that kind of access and ability to, instead of taking these birds in the wildlife rehabilitation center, instead of, once they're done necropsying and determining what the death is or what have you, instead of them tossing it out quite hastily or maybe haphazardly, we say, hey, maybe consider an opportunity to have this bird live a little longer in the hearts and minds of the community through these ceremonies. In this way of picking, allowing this conversation to happen, to go from the hands of federally protected into the hands of culturally protected, we have an opportunity to not just save our seabirds, but also save our relationship to these places and each other. Just seabirds as a whole, a living resource, very vital to the lifestyle and to the survivability of oceanic people and island people. And they're not just useful when they're dead, they're useful alive. They tell you all kinds of things. Seabirds are your nature's alarm system. They tell you, if you have seabirds in your community, that is an indication of a well-maintained, a very ecologically sound environment. You have the ability to tell the weather. You have the ability to tell the climate patterns of the year. Most seabirds are usually seasonal in the way of the way in how they come back to land, right? So a lot of their nesting habitats can give other indications to environmental patterns, and then as they pass on and transition into the next realm, they're often celebrated within ceremonies using leis. They make feather leis. They can be used as part of staffs, like wooden staffs with feathers on them. Almost all of them are an indication of the ability to communicate with a realm that we as humans are not able to. So in a Hawaiian perspective, feathers and birds, in Hawaiian, the word for bird is manu. So manu, especially seabirds and forest birds, they are amazing conduits of mana. Mana meaning the spiritual energy of you or your family and your people. So the presence of seabirds in your community is a very rich and abundant life.
So let's turn our discussion to the Pacific Remote Islands National Marine Sanctuary. Isn't there already a Remote Islands National Marine Monument? And can you tell me the difference between a National Marine Monument and a National Marine Sanctuary?
There is a National Marine Monument that exists within the Pacific Remote Islands. The Pacific Remote Islands make up 5 units, is kind of to glaze over, a lot of the details, but there's 5 units across this mid area of the Pacific. I'd say it's about 1,000 miles southwest of Hawaii. Within those 5 units, there's actually, so there's 5 units, but there's 7 islands and islets and atolls altogether within those 5 units. When the protections were originally pursued in 2009, they were given National Marine Monument status through the Antiquities Act, with protections from the shoreline to the 50 nautical mile zone in the ocean. And then in 2014, the PRI coalition, what is known as the Pacific Remote Islands Coalition, was formed to try and expand those protections from the 50 nautical mile out to the 200 nautical mile EEZ, which is the exclusive economic zone. So in 2014, they tried to protect all 5 units to the full extent, and was only able, through the Antiquities Act, was only able to protect 3 of those 5 units. The 2 that remain was Howland and Baker Island, as well as Kingaman Reef and Palmyra Atoll. Palmyra Atoll is usually known today as one of the premier research field stations in the world, part of one of the last remaining wild, healthy marine ecosystems in the world. So today, in today's age, meaning this year, the PRI coalition has pursued to finish the protections, to continue completing those protections for those last 2 units for Palmyra Atoll, Kingaman Reef, as well as Howland and Baker Island.
What's the current status of the Pacific Remote Islands National Marine Sanctuary?
So currently, the Pacific Remote Islands National Marine Sanctuary has just finished their first, has just finished what's called the public scoping comment period, which is what I was just alluding to, that the public had an opportunity to provide input towards whether the nomination was legit or not, or, if they want to give critiques towards it or caveats. That public comment period closed on June 2nd. And so now we wait, the public, including myself, we wait for the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries to review all the comments, analyze them, and incorporate them into the Federal Register. And then from there, the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries drafts a management plan according to the nomination and the comments. And then what happens after that is what's called I call it the second public comment period, but that's not the formal term. What that means is after the management plan is drafted, the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries then goes back out to the public again. It releases the draft management plan and says, hey, here's our draft, given all the comments and the nomination, and here's our draft management plan. And then they will go out to the public again, asking for comments and critiques towards the management plan. And that won't happen for, let's see, it's June. It won't happen till next year, sometime, maybe February, March, or April.
Is there some cultural input that Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders would like to see on the management of the Remote Pacific Islands National Marine Sanctuary?
For Pacific Remote Islands, there were 3 big requests in the nomination. The first one was that the entire area be fully protected to the full extent of the exclusive economic zone. The second one is that the renaming of the Pacific Remote Islands, which is already separate from the nomination, it was kind of already in play to be renamed. We are hoping that the process of renaming happens in a culturally appropriate and collaborative framework, meaning we would like input from the Pacific Islanders to help rename this area. And the third ask, which is that the National Marine Sanctuary have a co-management system that is inclusive of Pacific Island voices at equal to the decision-making, equal to the level of decision-making as that of the federal managers.
Okay. Well, let's explore just for a minute the issue of balancing ocean with social justice. I think our listeners already support efforts to promote a healthy ocean, but they may not have considered what costs such efforts have on segments of a local population. How can we be more mindful citizens in the work toward achieving a healthier ocean while also balancing local cultural issues?
Yeah, I really deeply appreciate this question. I think generally when we speak of the ocean, we tend to think of it separate than our life, whether we are from an island community or from the continent or, from somewhere else in the world. But, as humans on Earth, we have to find ways that humbly and lovingly remind ourselves that this world is 2/3 ocean. And so when we speak of social justice and ocean, environmentalism, to me, it's one and the same. How do we be better? It's recognizing, that everything we do impacts the ocean, and it's hard to kind of equate what we do in perhaps the Rocky Mountains, how that affects the ocean that's thousands and thousands of miles away. One of the biggest ever-present problems in the ocean is plastic pollution. So many of what we consume and what we need for convenience in our lives, comes from the privilege of having, or comes from having plastic helping us get it to us a little more conveniently. And I think that, addressing plastic pollution on a daily basis is an important thing to look at. On a larger scale, when we look at social justice on a broader convo as intersected with ocean, there's so many things that we can do every day. I will start first by saying, sometimes we fight for a healthy ocean and yet we do it at the expense of a healthy community. And I think that, as islanders or even just people on this earth, like, we have to recognize that healthy communities and healthy oceans are one and the same.
So where can listeners learn more about the sanctuary?
The Pacific Remote Island Sanctuary, they can learn more at protectpri.com. That is the coalition's website. We've got a bunch of information there to look at. Feel free to email protectpri@gmail.com if you feel you've gone to the website and you've seen, hey, it doesn't have something I want to ask. So feel free to reach out and email us. We're happy to, chat and talk story. Yeah.
So I am really grateful to you for being on the Women Mind the Water Artivist Series podcast. I expect listeners have gained new eyes with which to look at Hawaii and in assessing the challenges that face our ocean. I'd like to remind listeners that I've been speaking with Hoku Cody. Hoku is a native Hawaiian and ocean advocate and a seabird biologist and a proponent for community stewardship in approaching conservation and management issues. Hoku Cody is the latest guest on the Women Mind the Water Artivist Series podcast. The series can be viewed on womenmindthewater.com, Museum on Main Street, and YouTube. An audio-only version of this podcast is available on womenmindthewater.com, on iTunes, and Spotify. Women Mind the Water is grateful to Jane Rice for the use of her song, Women of Water. All rights for the Women Mind the Water name and logo belong to Pam Ferris-Olson. This is Pam Ferris-Olson.